Releasing courtesy of Bounty Films is an Australian film called The Dealer. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director and co-writer, Francisco Antonio Seguin, who co-wrote the film with Mateus Seguin. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, this is quite an intriguing tale of drugs, the police woman's involvement, and I mean a number of events that happened, which of course we won't spoil too much. What was the inspiration behind the story behind making this film?
I was first working on The Dealer back in 2010 for about 4 years. The first iteration, there were about 6 different versions. And I was working with two Greek film producers in Melbourne who were very keen to start working together in some capacity. And originally, the project was more directed towards an adult audience with a mature cast. And after 4 years of working together, we couldn't really find the balance between what I wanted, what they wanted. So the project was shelved for about 2 years. And then at some point, my oldest boy, Mateus, who by then was 16 going on 17, he was studying media and he actually produced a music video that really impressed upon me his talent and the fact that technology had come quite a fair way in terms of digital filmmaking. At that time, I had actually pulled the script back out and was very intrigued with the culture of youth-related depression, bullying, and social media pressures. And together, we just found a balance that he could bring to it a youth focus and I could bring to it an adult focus. And from there, we took the original concept of The Dealer, which was a game of Russian roulette, and placed it inside the world of children.
Okay, what an interesting history that your story screenplay has. So tell me about writing then the screenplay as it exists now, and the way you plotted the film.
We actually spent 4 weeks in Mateus's room. We post-it noted the entire breakdown of the story all over his walls, actually. There were hundreds of them. And we came up with the idea that the characters themselves would not be named, they would be labeled. We were more interested in creating representations within society as opposed to naming characters. We wanted it to be more open to a broader audience. So with that in mind, we just sat down, we looked at where we wanted these characters to go, where we thought they came from, and we did a lot of our own soul searching and our own work within our own lives. I come from a bullying background myself as a migrant to this country, and he had gone through some personal experiences as well in his youth, and so we married those two together, and that became the driver to flesh out the story and importantly the backstory and the emotions of some of these characters that are going through some very hard times.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's certainly quite compelling in that respect, and I know that Francisco, you have a Chilean background,
I do. I
and
do.
I was wondering how much that imbued, especially Chilean history, imbued your storyline.
I think what is prominent within there is potentially more of my own, I would say, influences from my parents as a Chilean child growing up in Australia. A lot of the work within The Dealer was more about our modern society, and I didn't want to get too bogged down with the spirituality of any of the Latin American contexts and things like that. So for this particular project, it became more about my own vision of the world, I guess, in terms of looking at a multicultural society, hence the multicultural inference. You know, being that I am Chilean, a lot of my work is driven by a different look and a different feel because I am sensitive to our migrant population. So yeah.
Okay, really interesting. Now, you've mentioned the Russian roulette aspect, which is a strong part of the story. And as I was watching that, of course, that's pretty tough to watch that. And
Mhm.
I was thinking of the Deer Hunter. You probably know that.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. S Tell me about shooting that sequence because that
Yeah.
pretty tough.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Deer Hunter. Obviously, I'm a child of the movies, and I was blessed to be raised by an older brother who was a film fanatic, and he introduced me to all those films when I was very, very young. I mean, I was too young to watch what I should have been watching, but my mother, who was also a film fanatic, never imposed any restrictions on my viewing. So I was watching Deer Hunter from a very young age, and when the Russian roulette aspect of the film was the driving force behind the story, I replayed that movie quite often in my head and was looking at what has changed, what is the focus now with such a game in our society today. How can I make it different? Obviously influenced by what they did in that film. The the exciting thing about the dealer and shooting those sequences is that I made a conscious effort to not cast actors in those sequences. Most of the game is actually played by our local youth. So we had a lot of our local youth who had heard about the project, wanted to be involved in some capacity as an extra or some kind of role, and we actually welcomed them on board. We had their permission from their parents for them to work on the film, and I think that's what gives it its authenticity and makes it quite terrifying to look at and hard to watch. Is we have young people who are not playing a role; they're participating in an event, and it's that participation in that event and the innocence of participating in such an ugly event that I think is what makes it hard to watch. So when we shot those sequences, they actually were quite enthusiastic. We had a fantastic armorer on the set who trained them through the use of the handgun. We had a lot of, we kept the set light because the subject matter was so dark and those sequences were quite challenging, but they came with vigor. These local kids, they were just really super excited to be on a movie. And I was super excited to welcome them on board. We treated the set as a family place. We kept them safe. We protected them. We looked after them, and I think that's what allowed them to feel the freedom to be able to play out those scenes without fear.
Okay, really interesting to hear that. Now, as you mentioned, you have some professional actors in the film, and it's a
Mm.
very strong female focus. Tell me about casting.
Casting was interesting. We actually, Anne McCaffrey, who plays the detective, is actually a local. So I am a resident of the Hills, and so we actually met uh, in the area. Anne was one of those people that popped out to us through a website at the time that we were using called Star Now. So we didn't go through any traditional casting organizations. We did all the casting ourselves. And then, of course, Tamara Lee Bailey and Romaine McSweeney were actually students at the Victorian College of the Arts at the time. They were in their first year of their drama studies, as well as Anthony as himself. And then, of course, Della Camarillo, who was an interesting find. He was actually recommended to me by a friend, a colleague at the time, who had worked with him on a television show here in Melbourne, and he was wanting to get his teeth into something meaty. And he was given my details. We caught up, we had a chat. He read the lengthy monologues that I had actually written for him, many of which we actually did reduce quite a bit. But he was very intrigued by the fact that this was a role unlike anything he'd done before. For Anne, as she said to me once, she is predominantly cast as the mother. And she said the thing about this film is that she gets to play something that is a complete opposite of who she is. And she really had to dig deep into some very dark places within herself that she hadn't visited in order to play this particular role. So yeah, the casting itself was interviews, lots of interviews, lots of one-on-ones, really winning over each of the cast members, including the supporting cast. I think I met for coffee with everyone because that was our drive. We wanted to make this a passion piece. We wanted to make this a very um, uh, uh, complete experience for each of the individuals. So Mateus and I spent a lot of time meeting a lot of actors through the process.
Oh, well done on that, and persevering and getting it all done. I'm always intrigued. How easy was it to get production behind you, to get financing, to be able to make the film, and how long did it take to shoot?
So the film actually took us 25 days, but it was 25 days across an entire year. So we actually started in October of 2017, 2 days before my birthday. And we shot predominantly on weekends. Most of us were all working day jobs at the time, and the students were also obviously studying. So we worked around everybody's schedules. We shot the first probably 30 pages within the first around about 3 to 4 months of the end of 2017, going into 2018. Took a break, then wrote the rest of the script and started shooting again from around about April of 2018 right through till October. So finance was predominantly a combination of myself and my business partner, which is my wife, Kiri. And then we had an independent investor come on board as well. So it was actually predominantly financed privately. Yeah, that's how we actually got it up.
How very, very interesting. And tell me about the editing process, because once you were shooting off and on, obviously over such a long period of time, knitting it all together must have been quite a task for you.
Well, it actually took a year.
Right.
So I started editing this project in early February, I think, or January of 2019, sorry, 2019. And I actually edited right through till around about April of 2020, which I believe by then we were in lockdown.
Mm.
So I actually spent all that time creating three different versions of the film. And the original length of The Dealer is actually 3 hours. But I needed to make sure that it was pacing properly and the story was working and it would be something that people could actually start and finish. So I made sure to tighten it up and remove a complete hour from that process. And yeah, I did some test screenings with some of the cast and crew throughout that period, and then finished it off by around about mid 2020, which is when we went into the rest of post production with audio.
Ah, very, very, very interesting. At what stage did Bounty Films get involved?
Interestingly enough, we completed the film in December of 2022, and Bounty Films sent me a message on the 11th of January of 2023. I remember it clearly. They had been tracking the film. So the film had its listing on IMDb, and Bounty Films actually reached out directly when they found out that the project had actually been completed by the end of the following year. So they reached out within, I think, the first week of going back to the office. So I got a text. I actually thought it was a joke, and I made sure they rang the office, and then I spoke to them from there, and they said they were very keen on the project. They wanted to know if it was ready, and I assured them it was. So we then moved forward with finalising everything for delivery by June of last year. Yeah.
How interesting to hear that as well. Now, the film was shot in Victoria, I gather. Tell me about locations that you were able to use.
Yeah, the locations were great. We actually shot all over. We shot in Frankston, we shot in the foothills of Victoria, we shot in the Melbourne CBD. The locations were predominantly supplied by businesses just through support of the film. Um, some family, of course, also donated resources as well. The biggest location, I think, and the most exciting location is where the Death Club is held and where the game is played and all that sort of thing, which is actually a local business club that was supplied by a film family here in the hills. Um, that was actually a venue called Two Floors, and I have to thank Lucy Beach and her family, because they are actually a family of filmmakers from England who live up here in the hills. And when we visited two floors, Lucy found out what we were trying to achieve. And because she's an artist herself, she automatically just said, "My casa, su casa," and said, "Here you go, just take it, do what you need to do." And we threw her in the film as well. She wanted to participate. Her sister works in the business. She works as a crew member on different films and TV shows in Melbourne. So she jumped on board to help out. And it was just one of those universal things. We were in the right place at the right time with every location that we went to, and every location just worked in creating this universe that we were trying to shape.
Well done on that. It's so good to persevere and over a number of years getting this film done. That's incredible to hear all that. So, Francisco, I'm intrigued. What attracted you to filmmaking in the first place?
Mad Max 2, that was the film. I grew up in Melbourne, predominantly in the housing commission areas of South Yarra. And then my parents managed to buy their first home quite quickly, and we moved to um, Dandenong North. And I spent most of my years as a young person just fantasizing, storytelling. I had been writing stories since I was apparently a very young child. I was writing in Spanish. I don't even recall doing it. My parents said, "We don't know how you did it, but you used to write in Spanish." And then I got into storytelling as a young man in primary school, and that just led to a passion for writing stories. And it wasn't until I went to the theatre in 1981. It was New Year's Eve, and Mad Max 2 was on the screens. And my mother actually said it was like, I remember it very clearly. It was a 40-degree day, and we were sweating it out. And she said, "We need to do something." And I said, "Well, I'd like to go see this movie." And the family said, "Sure." I don't know if anybody remembers, but back then we used to have the movie magazine,
Ah,
and there was a two-page spread on the movie magazine of these amazing characters in this world. And I just said, "I want to see this." And they said, "All right, let's go." So we went, and I came out changed. I watched that film, and every aspect of it just spoke to me. And I walked out that day wanting to be a filmmaker, wanting to be a storyteller within film as my medium. I've always known I've wanted to tell stories, but I never really knew the medium. I tried my hand at theatre. I was a theatre director and producer and an actor for a little while, but it was always film. Film was always what um, drives my passion.
okay. Again, such an interesting story and background.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So, The Dealer, how is the film going to be rolled out?
So the dealer has already started rolling out. It's been hitting platforms worldwide. So we're currently on YouTube Movies, Google TV Movies, and it's moving on to Prime. It's also going to be doing its run across some of the advertised-based platforms as well, Tubi, Plex, all those others. So Bounty's plan from the beginning was, they asked me, "Where do you want it to go?" And I said, "I want it to go everywhere." I said, it's a film that I think speaks to a lot of different people. Bounty's even got other plans for the film with respect to a dubbed version, I should say. There's the Blu-ray, the DVD that's also coming. So it's basically getting it's in the entire treatment at the end of the day. And so yeah, it's been exciting so far, because we've already had some fans in the US who've watched the film on YouTube Movies. We've had some fans in Europe. We've got family in Latin America that are waiting. We've got family in Greece as well, because my wife is of a Greek background. So yeah, we've got a lot of people out there really keen, really excited, and it is already starting to make traction, and we're hearing some great feedback from people as well, who've actually written back to us directly, sharing their experiences and how it's affected them and how it's spoken to them on a personal level as well. And that's our driver. I think we always wanted to make our first film a film that spoke emotionally. The C Motion Pictures is a family-oriented, emotional family. Everything we deal in is spiritual, and so our work is about speaking to people on their level. And I think we're starting to accomplish that with the dealer, which is a good start.
It is well done on that because it's amazing how films can be so impactful for people.
Exactly.
So yeah, and certainly this film will have an impact, The Dealer, which is great. So, Francisco, I'm now intrigued. Are you planning another film?
We are. I'm deeply entrenched in writing at the moment. We have a slate of 5 projects that we're actually developing. And we are taking the advice of Bounty. Bounty is very keen to work closely with us and see what we've got coming up. And so we are staying within that crime space at the moment. And we are looking at um, some chamber pieces in the future coming up. Yeah, so we're deeply in the realm of looking at expanding not so much on the dealer universe, but on the C Motion Pictures crime universe. I think we have a very unique sort of take on crime, and I think for us, focusing on female-driven pieces is very important. I write predominantly for female characters. I think it's my mother's influence. I can't kind of pinpoint as to why that is, but I've always been intrigued by the female take on dark situations and situations that involve emotion. So we're still in that space. That's where we're heading with our next film. So yeah, keep a lookout because we are at present in the heavy stages of writing and putting something together in the coming years.
Ah, look forward to that. That sounds like you've got some interesting projects ahead. So well done on that. Look, Francisco, great to talk to you. And I will ask you a question I love asking filmmakers. Have you seen anything recently in cinemas, on streaming, on television, whatever, that has impacted you?
I try to watch anything and everything. I think Steven Spielberg said it once that he makes an effort to watch a movie every day, no matter what that movie is. Even if he's finished on the set late at night, he'll make an effort to watch a movie to stay fresh. So I tend to watch anything that's out there. I think of recent note, I think I watched a film on a platform, The Fall, which I found quite interesting. I think it, from a young person's perspective, I found it an intriguing setup. Um, it didn't affect me as much as I thought it could have, but I think that's because I'm an old man and I don't associate with a lot of young topics. But it was a film that I found from a production perspective was very well done given it's a 80-90 minute drama with 2 people on a pole. And I thought that was, that was a great challenge. And and those are the films that probably impact me the most is where have filmmakers actually created a challenge? Where have they not just found the tropes to make it easy to get their characters out of a situation? I like to see films where people work hard, and yeah, so that's probably the last one I saw where I think the characters were really made to work hard, and the story was it really forced the screenwriters to actually put in a lot of effort. Because I think that for me anyway, when I write, when I develop work, I never look for the easy way out. And I think at present we're probably in a space where filmmakers are starting to find themselves having to challenge their stories and their characters a bit more because CGI and what have you, for a low budget filmmaker, it's not always the solution. So it's about being innovative with your story and being innovative with your characters. So for me, that one was actually quite good in that respect.
Fair enough. That's a good recommendation, and I agree. It's all about the story. We've been
It is.
speaking to Francisco Antonio Seguin, the director and co-writer of The Dealer, releasing on various streaming platforms, courtesy of Bounty Films. Francisco, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been lovely.
Okay, all the best. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.